Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Brian from Zen Gate. I hope everybody's having an amazing day. We have another fireside chat coming up. This time it's with none other than Dan, CEO of Zen Gate, and Charles Hoskinson, CEO of IOG, creator of Cardano and Midnight. We're going to start out just by saying hello, and we're going to kind of roll right in it. Charles, how you been? What's going on with you nowadays?
We're busy, man. So much stuff is going on right now. Got crazy new projects like Quantum Hosky, got Midnight going on, got all the Cardano stuff. We got a hard fork coming, I think, tomorrow. I've lost track of time. It's like every day there's something new. Traveling like crazy. I was just in Vegas. Before that, I was in California, and now I'm here. Sent 10 people to the inauguration. They had a lot of fun running around in black suits and ties and, hobnobbing with the rich people there. I was at World of Concrete, learning how concrete works. And that was just the last 3 weeks. So it's been nuts. And we got a whole bunch of undisclosed stuff we're working on, doing a town hall in February, I think, about Wheatland, doing another town hall in Laramie about a pack we're setting up in Wyoming. So and I'm doing it.
You're always on the go, Charles. Dan, how
Oh,
about you? What's new with you? What's going on with Zen Gate Palm Economy?
We're firing on all cylinders, on all engines a go. Getting ready for TGE. We're rolling out Palmyra Pro right now. We're working on boarding those 20,000 beehives in Zambia. So that's going to be the first mass onboarding onto Palmyra and Palmyra Pro. We got projects just lined up. We're doing a lot of due diligence right now on projects for Endeavor and STO tokenization. Got a lot of really amazing lithium projects, a lot of EV focused projects. We also just signed with the Yerba Mate Federation to put Yerba Mate on Palmyra. Several other MOUs. I'm sure you guys have seen some of the other MOUs that came through that we partnered up with, the company we partnered up with, working on the lithium index, working on the lithium-backed stable coin. We're actually I'm in chats with Alex, none other than Alex Chupornoy of Ergo, who's going to be working with us on both the lithium stablecoin and the lithium index. Just lots and lots of stuff. Greece, we onboarded Greek olive oil, so there's hundreds of producers from Greece that are coming onto Palmyra. I had the pleasure of not traveling for the past month. It's before that I was traveling literally, and I remember, Charles, when you told me back in 2017, 2018, we'd put in like 340 days out of the year traveling, something like that, right? I kind of did. I've been kind of not doing exactly that, but close to that. And yeah, just staying put for a month has been really nice. I was able to really concentrate on work. But yeah, quite a lot of stuff happening.
Busy, busy. Sounds like both you guys are always busy on the go, right? As a CEO's job is to continue to drive innovation in the companies, right? Let's kind of just jump right into it. Charles, you and Dan worked together in emerging markets for a while back in 2017 with Cardano. Can you maybe talk about a little bit about how Cardano has integrated into emerging markets, especially regions such as Argentina and Latin
yeah.
America in general?
Oh, it wasn't just 2017. I mean, Dan came on board, I think, early 2016 or late 2015, somewhere in that time band. Like the clock gets ahead of you at some point, so you always have difficulty remembering specific dates if it's a decade ago. But he was there at very much the beginning, and we always had a strong focus on emerging economies. And Dan's expertise has always been Central Asia and Eastern Europe and Russia. And so Dan spent quite a bit of time going to places like Georgia, for example. We spent some time there. Went and opened up the whole government. In fact, when the Cardano Foundation takes credit for all that wine and these other things, well, that would have never happened had Friedman not gone there and actually talked to the prime minister and these other people, because he opened the country and got people where they needed to be. And he's traveled extensively all throughout Asia. Has a lot of experience in Southeast Asia and Korea, Japan, these areas. And lately, Dan went down with us to Argentina And there, Argentina is a really interesting place because there's a massive amount of deregulation happening inside that economy. And the government's kind of looking for blockchain solutions to new things. And so they have everything from large lithium deposits to potentially a lot of oil and gas exploration that they're going to be doing, a ton of agricultural things. And they need to have that enter the market in a more fair way than it currently is. So there's a strong appetite for blockchain products there, and it's really a lot of fun to work with Dan on various different things. I had a chance to have dinner with him when we were down there, and twice he came to the Asado and got to meet everybody there. And then we also went to a nice steakhouse and we chatted shop. And it's been fun to watch you guys grow from just kind of an idea in Sri Lanka to this ecosystem. And I think it's going to be a great driver of utility and use in the Cardano ecosystem and in affiliated ecosystems like Ergo.
You're muted there, Brian.
Do you want to add on, Dan? Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, we have opened up quite a few jurisdictions. Eastern Europe and Asia was kind of my thing back in the teens and early 20s when Charles and I were working together. And I mean, aside from that, Cardano has been in Africa for a long time, and Cardano's made strides in Africa. In the U.S. as well, and the thing is, South America right now is really just primed. It's primed for real adoption, real integration of blockchain, and what I keep saying, a solution, a problem, a solution for a problem, not a solution looking for a problem to solve. And this is why it's been so exciting being in LATAM and, being there with Charles and the IOG crew and for the Zen Gate team to be there kind of on the ground, because and this is something that actually I got from working with Charles back in the day. As he said, I was always kind of boots on the ground. And so I brought that particular ethos to Zen Gate when I founded Zen Gate. And that's what we've been doing. We are boots on the ground. And that's really that's what I love about Cardano, and that's what I love about blockchain tech in general. The real stuff is that you are boots on the ground. You're speaking to the real people that are going to be using it. You're not in some room somewhere trying to figure out, oh, well, maybe this will work. I don't really know this world, but I think it needs it. No, you're on the ground. You're talking to people. You're telling them, I can solve this for you. And you're saying, oh, you can? Okay, yeah, we are interested. And Cardano does that, and Ergo does that. And so this is why it's so exciting to just be right there in LATAM right now and other jurisdictions before, and just kind of making these things happen, solving problems and bringing solutions.
Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit and talk about how Palmyra and the Palm economy kind of can help businesses in Latin America and other emerging markets? Because it's not just Latin America, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, really, it's again, just like with Cardano, Palmyra is all about access. It's about opportunity inclusion. And so what we're doing in LATAM is essentially that we're bringing solutions for various different issues that they're having with traceability through tokenization, RWAs, and Winter Protocol. With Endeavor and the STO tokenization, so basically giving them a way to access markets that they haven't had access to before, and giving the MSMEs access to funding vehicles and tooling that they haven't had before, and just kind of giving them the opportunity to streamline these processes, to digitize, to access global markets. Because again, say in Argentina, it's a very interesting place. Right now with the Milei administration, you have a lot of this, what Charles just said, deregulation happening. And some people say that, oh, deregulation, that's anarchy. Well, no, when your entire, literally several decades have been just really rooted in corruption. I mean, that is why Milei is so popular there, because he is kind of decorrupting the entire system, and he's opening up the entire system. And so this deregulation comes in the wake of these, gatekeepers kind of losing their stranglehold on the economy there in the system. And so what's happening is you have a lot of opportunity that is coming on board there. And this opportunity to us, where we don't live in this hyper corrupt environment, we're like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, that's just access to, fair financing, or what we think is fair financing. They don't have that. They, for the first time, have access to fair financing and fair market trade and all these different things on a large scale. And they're just thinking like, wait a second. So what do we do with this? How do we harness this? And so this is where tools like Palmyra, like traceability on Palmyra, like the market tokenization of RWAs in Palmyra, and the trading comes in. This is where we can utilize such things as, say, midnight, for example, for privacy, because you don't want to have people worried about when people are coming off from a corrupt, totalitarian-esque type of government to a democratized, deregulated ecosystem. You still have this residual of what if I piss off the wrong people and they'll get vindictive and they'll cancel me. And so with that, you also have to have, if you give them access and you bring them out of this like hole that they've been living in, you have to give them the opportunity to stay anonymous and private and protected to be able to transact. And again, that's why I'm so excited about Midnight. One of the reasons why I'm so excited about Midnight.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Midnight here a little bit, but talking about deregulation, and I have a question for Charles. Charles, we see a lot of deregulation happen, and even the change in administration here in the United States.
Mhm.
How do you see adoption of Cardano, maybe say as a reserve, or even just adoption in the government progressing as places like Argentina deregulate and the administrations change here in the United States?
Well, I think it's a bullish environment for any cryptocurrency project. Cardano is going to do very well because we're considered kind of a gold standard. We're one of those coins that's just always around, like XRP and other things like that. It's like if you live long enough, they forget why they hate you, and they're like, I guess we can use those guys. So Cardano is pretty special, and we have a lot of really competitive edges that are coming online. You see, we built an amazing foundation for a very tall skyscraper. And we're now actually starting to get to the point where the skyscraper is going above ground and that enormous foundation is built and it's being erected rather quickly. When you look at things like Hydra Doom, that wasn't just an amazing tech demo to showcase a video game. It was literally showing where Hydra can go over a period of 3 to 5 years. A million TPS is not a joke. It's a very serious thing, and it's showing. Start thinking about like load balancing, event-oriented programming, micro tipping. You think about like DEXs that are enabled, using it as a surface for rollups. And it turns out that all these things fit hand in glove. So we'll be the best place for an optimism style thing. We'll be the best thing for a data availability style thing. And you can use heads as kind of watchers to do event-oriented programming to kind of watch things on the chain and make decisions, and ultra high TPS rate with fast finality. So those are all things that are now coming as a result of Hydra, and we see them reflected in protocols like Gummy Worm and Midgard. And those aren't like long-term horizon things. Midgard actually should be in market this year if Anastasia works hard on it, and I believe that major progress will also be made in Gummy Worm. Then you see not too far behind it things like Leos, which will basically make Cardano one of the fastest layer ones, but preserving all of the decentralization and security that we currently have. So that very strong foundation. The development model has massively improved as well. Plinth gives us the highest assurance programming language in the entire cryptocurrency industry. But then we have Aiken, and we also have TypeScript. So you have a web-oriented language, you have a Rust-style dialect, and you have a high assurance language, which means it's choose your own adventure. Are you building government-scale applications for NASA, which the foundation's building a relationship for? Or are you building, your latest and greatest web application and you want to move fast and break things? Well, you can do all of that, in the Cardano ecosystem, and you don't have to make any sacrifices. And then we have best in class governance as well, which was a 2-year roadmap. And it's finally come to a conclusion with what we have coming online with the next hard fork. And basically that means that we have an end-to-end fully decentralized government, not a name only, but an actual one with elected representatives and liquid democracy and an on-chain constitution and these things. And the Treasury is activating as a direct consequence of that. There's over $1.5 billion of value in the Cardano Treasury, which is coming online as a result of the governance coming online for an annual budget. So every year, hundreds of millions of dollars can be deployed to growth hack the Cardano ecosystem and to pay for a lot of the things that we want to do as an ecosystem. And we all get to decide that together as an on-chain government. So when you look at the balancing of things in that foundation, from all this amazing investments in scalability technology to the DevX getting exponentially better, to the governance side of things, Cardano's a really strong position. And what's happening is we're now matching that with entities that are going out there and finding great business. So what we're focused on a lot in IO, in addition to building Cardano, is building on Cardano. So like the partner change idea, for example, Midnight is the first, but by no means the last. There's going to be a lot of those amazing things coming. And then we got Lace that's really starting to reach a high degree of maturity. It's going multi-chain. It's going to be a Bitcoin wallet here in a little bit. We just launched the DApp store not too long ago, just like literally yesterday. So that's the beginning of the DApp Explorer, and then it'll eventually become a much larger thing. Bitcoin DeFi is also coming. That's an incredible USP for our ecosystem. And there, Cardano is going to be the best place to enable smart contracts on Bitcoin. Low latency, high performance, low cost contracts that you pay in Bitcoin for. So that's really powerful. And that opens a $2 trillion marketplace up. And all of the UTXO chains are going to benefit, whether it be Ergo or Cardano or Nervos or anybody who's like in the right side of this, as opposed to people who are on the Ethereum style account world. So I think we have a lot of good stuff here. It smells pretty good. Yeah, I like that. I like what we're cooking.
Yeah, I agree. And the UTXO, we're kind of UTXO based, and I know Dan will kind of touch on that here in a little bit. But Charles, I want to ask you about Midnight and talk about real world assets, right? The buzzword in crypto, as it was 4 years ago, was NFTs. This year seems to be everybody's into real world assets. Can you talk about maybe the role that Midnight will play in bringing real world assets on chain and how that will work?
So Midnight really does two big things. So one thing is this chain of chains idea, where it's connecting tissue to bring all the different blockchains together and allow people to have hybrid applications. So you need a lot of really complicated technology for that. That's where Minotaur comes from, this concept of multi-resource consensus and the idea of hybrid applications and bridges. And basically the idea is when somebody builds something, whether it be on Ethereum or Solana or Cardano, they basically can build it, use Midnight as a service for computational privacy and identity, pay transaction fees in their token, whether it be Sol or ETH or whatever, and then just works. And they don't have to think too much about it. But actually, the state is being managed on two blockchains at the same time. The other thing that Midnight is focused on is the bridge between the legacy world and the Web3 world, which is what you're talking about. And the big thing is real world assets and also real business on a blockchain. So the natural question to ask is, well, why do you not have real business on blockchains right now? And the reason being is you don't have privacy. It's just that simple. Every business endeavor has a public side and a private side. You probably, as a private company, don't want all of your HR disputes being broadcast live to everybody. You probably don't want, as a private company, how much you pay your employees. You probably don't want, as a private company, all the terms of your contracts that you sign with other people outside of what you're by regulation required to reveal. A lot of cases, you don't disclose these types of things outside of your domain. So maybe the CEO gets to see it and the HR director gets to see it, but the janitor doesn't get to see it. So when you think of real world applications and assets, typically you have to disclose, okay, where are the boundaries between publicity and privacy? And you have role based disclosure. So a privacy coin is O of one. You basically just you get to see it, nobody else gets to see it. An organization is a different privacy schema. And real world assets are exactly the same. When you think about securities and real estate and intellectual property, maybe you want to issue an NFT, but the royalty flows are not disclosed. Or maybe you want to have a security token and you have voting rights as a public holder, but how you voted is not disclosed, as an example. But you just the tallies of these types of things. So that's how you hybridize these types of different realms. And real world assets, the reason why they haven't been a big thing is they can't bridge that gap right now into the cryptocurrency space. Second, you need identity because every single real world asset is typically identified to an owner. And it's not an address, it's a person because of a regulatory schema. Like I have an obligation if I have a security to know who my shareholders are. And I have to be able to identify and report that in financial disclosures. So you need those two sides together. And the absence of those have basically meant that the cryptocurrency space has mostly had to sit out. And where and when they've been implemented, typically it's implemented through centralized systems. So there's somebody out there who like puts it on a blockchain, just like Circle's on a blockchain, but it's not really that decentralized because the entire value of the asset comes from a central issuer and your belief in their adherence to regulation. So, that's why we're really excited about Midnight, and the fact that we can not only bring that to the Cardano ecosystem, but as a service layer to the entire space as a chain of chains is a super powerful thing. And Cardano gets first crack at that. So it's really going to bring a lot of value, liquidity, and new users into our ecosystem.
Absolutely. And Dan, I know you talk about privacy and identity for real world assets all the time. Can you talk a little bit about how Cardano is leveraged in the Palmyra ecosystem, and then also how may we take advantage of Midnight in the future?
No, absolutely. Well, I'll start working kind of backwards from what you've asked, because it'll be in better context. So, how can we leverage Midnight? Well, exactly like Charles said, what we need to do is we need to have assets tied to people. Okay, but as we spoke before, as we said before, you don't want these people to be, to be doxxed. A lot of times, people don't want to be doxxed with, with some of this information. Rightfully so. However, you need to be able to identify ownership. You need to be able to identify compliance, for example, and you want to do it in a decentralized way, and you want to do it in a way where people don't feel like there's one single, single point and a single attack vector that can screw them up. Like a centralized entity can use information leakage will screw you up, because that centralized entity leaked your information, that information is stolen, or the centralized entity actually becomes adversarial in some countries and uses this information against you. This is where things like zero knowledge protocols come into play, and this is where something like Midnight comes into play, because now we can actually better build better tech with it. Build better ways to say assign digital identities to different types of assets, assign ownership to different types of assets, distribute these assets in a more in a more robust way, because we have the ability to give the owner privacy so that they're more comfortable with kind of more access to their identity. So that's why it's so exciting. Now, the way we utilize Cardano is exactly that. We utilize it for these transactions, just like we do with Ergo. We utilize both blockchains. We built Winter Protocol on both Cardano and Ergo, and both use NFTs, again, as was mentioned before, to tokenize assets. And then we utilize all this different tooling, like like the UTXO models, say, transaction fee system, which is basically it's very attractive for a business that wants to, say, tokenize. And this is something that I brought up before quite a bit. You go on Ethereum and you want to tokenize a million sacks of tea, for example, and each one of those is going to need a NFT. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to tell them, oh, it's going to cost you, like $2 or $3 per asset, $4 per asset tokenized. That doesn't make any sense when they're selling it for like, $6 a kilo, $5 a kilo. It doesn't make sense. But you come to them with an EUTXO model where you can actually have several different transactions inside the EUTXO, and that makes sense. That makes business sense. And this is just the business side. This is not counting all the great tech that's around it, all the tooling that we can utilize to make these assets. Like, say, for example, native assets. Again, with native assets, what you have is a reduced plate for attack. So you don't have a contract to attack here, right? And this is actually something that we just had to go through with one of the exchanges that we're working with, explaining to them how native assets work, because they said, well, you need to, you're responsible for the smart contract on the token. There is no smart contract. It's a native asset. Yeah, but we have to be able to audit the smart contract. There is no smart contract. There is no auditing for the smart contract, because it is made so you don't have to do that. To some, this is still a mind-boggling concept. To me, as a business, this is a huge value add, This is less time I have to spend on auditing, less time I have to spend on building tech around it to protect it, and more time and more resources I can spend on actually building out the tech to bring what we said is opportunity inclusion to our users. And so, like I said, that's why Cardano is so exciting, because I was there with Charles almost from the beginning. We built this up from nothing, and now is this big, beautiful, robust system with this amazing tooling, with all these different ways to write contracts, all this different ecosystem tooling that's around, because this 5-6 years ago, we still didn't have this, now we have this right now. We have all this tooling coming from all these projects. And so it's just a pleasure to build in. It's very business viable to build in, and it's very tech viable to build in. And it's also very mission viable to build in, because you still get to keep to your first principles. You don't have to sacrifice your first principles of decentralization, of democratization, of like I said, of opportunity inclusion. And I keep saying that because I don't believe in leveling playing fields. I don't think that's the right terminology. Leveling playing field sounds like communism to me, because you can never level the playing field. There's always going to be somebody who's got more, somebody's got less. It's never going to be that. But if you give everybody the opportunity to succeed and let them take that opportunity, let them take the stride themselves and choose to take that opportunity, that's where real change happens. And that's Cardano, and that's Ergo. And that's why we're in these ecosystems.
I couldn't hear you, and couldn't say it better myself, right? And that's one of the reasons why I joined Cardano way back when, and been here and joined the Zen Gate team. And it's been a pleasure to build on Cardano and see the way things have progressed with, like you said, the infrastructure, and just the way that people are continuing to innovate on Cardano and Ergo also. Charles, real world assets kind of have been a hot topic now for a while. How do you see maybe Zen Gate and Palmyra integrating Midnight? I know you talked a little bit about credentials. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. So Midnight is a toolkit, and it's there to work with other ledgers. And you can deploy native on Midnight, or as a hybrid application on Cardano and Midnight, or potentially Midnight and Ergo, for example. So you can kind of choose your own adventure of what infrastructure makes the most sense. And you pay the fees and kind of the underlying token that makes most sense for your reference customer. And you look at a lot of different things. For example, what is the nature of the real world asset? So fractionalized gold, for example, is a world of difference from something like real estate. So when you think of real estate, your sales latency is going to be very infrequent. You're not trading the same piece of land 400 times a day. Maybe you sell it every few months, or every few years, or maybe every few decades. And then typically the amount of metadata associated with the asset is going to be radically different based on its nature. So gold is, or any commodity, they tend to be very standardized in the way that we present them. Whereas real estate is totally bespoke. You got everything from the mineral rights, the land rights, and the water rights, and who has easements, and there's so many different things there, and some are private arrangements and some are public arrangements. So both of those are real world assets, but they obviously are radically different concepts from these different things. So you take a look at your asset schema, and then based on that, you kind of then figure out, okay, what's the best way of representing this? And that's typically also connected to the marketplaces and the people in those marketplaces who will be consuming that. So those marketplaces could be things like regulated stock exchanges, for example, or commodities exchanges, or those marketplaces can be a DEX and be completely decentralized. And then the people who buy it, those can be anonymous people, pseudonymous people, or regulated, fully vetted and verified people that have strong KYC that's behind that go through multiple steps. And then also, what are the contractual terms that typically get involved here? Because when you do these things, usually there's some notion of a consumer understanding of warranties and representations, refund policy, delivery terms, all these things. So commodities is very standardized. Whereas real estate, there are standardized templates that are geographically bound, but they're within those templates highly customizable. Earnest money and time of delivery and disclosures and these types of things. So what blockchain technology does for you is it basically creates an audit trail, and it gives you one place where all the action can happen. So where the contracts can live and where the warrants and representations can make, and basically the governance of these assets and so forth. And Midnight basically gives you the identity and the privacy component of that. And Cardano is becoming increasingly more transactable, meaning we're going to be able to do a lot more volume very soon, thanks to Midgard and later Laos and these other innovations. And we can do those things interoperable with many other ecosystems, like Bitcoin, for example. And so then you can start thinking of emergent properties of that. For example, what if I want to do a real estate transaction, but I want to collateralize it with Bitcoin, and I want to keep the buyers private but verifiable to the regulators in the jurisdiction on Midnight, and then I want it to settle on Ergo. That would be like a pattern. And when you talk about hybrid applications, you can put these things together as a bespoke pattern. And maybe we want the discovery of this to happen through an auction process that Palmyra runs, for example. And maybe there are assets in the Palmyra ecosystem, commodities, for example, that are going to be used as part of collateral or insurance for that transaction. Because you think about the developing world, it's like, well, a lot of people have no liquidity, but they have farmland, they have agricultural output, they have all these different characteristics. And so when I go for credit, where do I get my credit worthiness from? Well, if I could collateralize or tokenize my yields of my farm or my commodities, but I don't necessarily want to give them up, but I just want to post them as collateral and don't allow rehypothecation. Well, that's an example of an asset flow of the future. And usually those things are very complicated, very expensive to do, and usually reserved for large entities with lawyers and case by case basis. Well, what blockchain does is it brings that economy of scale way, 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 way down and makes it accessible to somebody who makes $50 a month or $100 a month. It also allows you to template a lot of these things and create marketplaces and liquidity for them. So, if I want to get commodities, but I don't need delivery for 6 months, maybe I take the collateral and insure it. And if they default, I get that yield. So that's how I get some coconuts or something like that. And if I do it 700 times, maybe I now actually have enough coconuts to have King Supers be able to get all of its coconuts in the winter, from that thing. You see, and that's the kind of magic you see. We can't predict that ahead of time, right? It just occurs organically through market dynamics. But the thing is, the transaction fee will be very low, through all this, because all these things are just kind of parameters and a kind of a meta smart contract, and it's a choose your own adventure for putting these things together.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan, I've heard you talk a million times about collateralization of commodities and how that can kind of change the industry, bringing blockchain into it. Can you talk a little bit about how Palmyra and the Palm economy is going to be working on that in the future and what that means mostly for the different industries?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's say, for example, one of the ways is through what we call trade DeFi and various different types of trade financing. And as Charles mentioned, um, in emerging economies, you don't have like what we call liquidity in the developed financial markets, but you have liquidity that is in the commodity and land ownership markets. And so, yeah, I mean, the people that have the most liquid assets are the ones that have assets that are the most used, the most utilized. So, like, say, it was kind of the same. I mean, it's not the most pleasant example, but back in the Soviet times, because I grew up in Ukraine and the Soviet Ukraine, the USSR. So one of our kind of staples of somebody who is wealthy, like, so basically the archetypal wealthy person with connections is a butcher. You might have seen this in movies, like gangsters or butchers in the the former Eastern Bloc. And the reason for that being is that really, in reality, that's what it was. Butchers were some of the more butchers would make more money than doctors in Soviet times. The reason being wasn't because they were gangsters, but because they had access to something that was very sought after and liquid, and that was meat, because you couldn't just go to the store and buy yourself a steak. like you can in the developed world, like you can, in Pennsylvania. You couldn't do that in the Soviet Union. You couldn't just go to the meat market and buy steak. You never had steak. You hardly had chicken. Just people are not used to this. So when you have access to such things as steak, you then become a liquidity holder and potentially a liquidity provider. And so then you can trade this steak or these cuts of meat for other things, and then again, for like political favors. You bring somebody a couple of kilos of meat that they can't get anywhere else. They owe you a favor. You trade it for property, you trade it for whatever, right? And so that's where that was liquidity, versus the rubles, because rubles, rubles got changed around. Like I remember, my uncle is a pretty well-known Ukrainian artist, and he drew the original currency, the hryvnia, the original Ukrainian currency. And so he actually, it's a story that he told us, he was in the Soviet times, was pretty rich. He had 50,000 rubles saved, and that was like millions, literally worth millions. And when the Soviet government used to like to, just fight inflation by, reducing, like taking off zeros. And so one day his 50,000 rubles became 5,000 rubles just overnight. And and it's not that the buying power changed. It literally just, they're like, oh yeah, now you have 5,000 rubles. Whoops. Well, in the developing economies, you have that as well. You have really just archaic fiat currencies. You have governments that are, that are screwing up these currencies, that are making these currencies. Look, even in South America, like I said, Milei is trying to fix the peso. And he has. He's having huge strides. But I'll tell you, I went over there, exchanged $1,000 at a Western Union. I thought I robbed the bank. I literally needed a briefcase, a suitcase to carry away $1,000 worth of peso, because there's just so much of it. And so what you have is commodities that are not. That basically have a much more stable, a much less volatile appeal to people, right? And so this is how you can then transact liquidity. You basically do it through commodity, you do it through land ownership, you do it through lithium deposits that you can transact in, because lithium has a more or less worldwide agreed on price. This is actually something why we are working on this so hard, is because a unified lithium index is crucial, because it once again will create an even more stable market for lithium, because there is no really unified index. But lithium is something that's more of a worldwide type of commodity. And you can go out there and you can say, okay, I can sell this lithium for X amount of dollars, because that's what it's worth here, and I have all these people that are looking for it. Okay, so it's a buyer's market, and so in that type of economy, if you have lithium, if you hold lithium and you can collateralize lithium, you can collateralize lithium over collateralizing against or even holding fiat. And so this is how Palmyra is kind of utilizing blockchain technology, where we're basically bringing these services in a much more accessible way. And this is just, without, I don't want to take up too much time to talking about this, but that's what it's all about, is bringing that access, and not just bringing it to the big boys that already had that access, but bringing it to the average person that didn't have access to, say, being able to invest in a lithium operation, or being able to have fractional ownership of a lithium operation, or fractional ownership of lithium deposits, and not just lithium, gold, silver, copper, grains, and soft commodities. This was not, they did not have access to this before. They did not have ways to hedge their money, and instead they saw their money just do this. Now they do, and that's what Palmyra brings to them. They brings to them that kind of tunneling, that kind of opportunity through Palmyra Pro. If you're a producer, if you're looking to really normalize and open up access to your commodities, if you are utilizing the Palmyra platform for trading, Again, open markets, of utilizing Palmyra Endeavor for STOs and fractional ownership of these commodity operations. It's just all about this access and all about the ways to hedge against a highly volatile environment in which, like I said, you have access to commodities, but you don't have access to tooling that will open up a liquidity market for those commodities. That's what Palmyra is about. It opens up that market opportunity for them.
Charles, I want you to kind of build off of that a little bit, maybe for me. I know back when Cardano was first coming alive, a lot of the things that you spoke about was giving access to people, right? How do you see Palmyra and what Dan's doing with the Palm economy bringing access, and just some general thoughts on that?
So first things first, one of the things you have to understand about commodities is that commodities are horrendously fragmented and still suffer from a lot of broken marketplaces. And that is always to the detriment of the poorest people in the world. There's no exceptions to that. So when you have well regulated, well operating, unified commodities markets, typically speaking, it's very easy for people to enter and exit and be treated fairly. So, for example, in the United States of America, I'm a commodity producer. I grow hay. When I cut that, it enters the global hay market. Okay. And it's buyers and sellers, and it's very easy to interface with that market, and it's quite standard. And for the most part, the price I pay or sell for is very similar to everybody else. There's no big hay cartel that shows up and says, "Well, Charles, you get $80 a ton, but Bob over here gets $200." Well, that is not the case for tea in Sri Lanka or lithium in Argentina or a vast majority of resources in Africa. You have concession deals, government debt with China where they get shit for free. You have cartels that form, and that even though you are selling something super valuable like gold or lithium or diamonds, you get a very low price. And then this other guy over there gets massive markup for that. So how you solve the problem is transparency in markets. You don't go and invade people or sanction people. What you do is just basically create decentralized marketplaces. And then first, you get much better price discovery in these micro markets. And then you can move liquidity into those markets and back. And then you can start working around scalability and grading and attestation of claims and the supply chain and these types of things. So it's a very complicated problem. And to get all the way down to base metal for that coffee farmer living on a hectare of land in Ethiopia, or to that lithium miner, in the middle of the Amazon, that's a challenging thing. But the minute that blockchain touches that, then it starts touching everything, because it's not just the commodity. Remember, these are subsistence commodity sellers. So what does that mean? It means that their entire livelihood is connected to that commodity. So that is their identity system, their payment system, their real estate system, their credit system. It's basically all of the things that we've been talking about for the last 10 years when we talk about banking the unbanked and creating financial systems for the unbanked. So it requires kind of an all of the above strategy to kind of get that done. You have to be really good at navigating local politics and law. You have to be really good at identity and be able to understand how to identify assets and people. You have to be really good at building marketplaces. You have to be really good at building payment systems. You have to be really good at integrating infrastructure for all these things. And what's nice about blockchain is it has recipes for all these different things. For identity, you have things like Hyperledger Adentis or Indy. For blockchain, you have things like Ergo or Cardano. For payment systems, you have things like payment channels or state channels like Hydra or Lightning, this type of stuff that can sit on and allow you to do all of that stuff for marketplaces. Well, DEXs are the beginning of that type of infrastructure, where you have assets that trade and market makers and these things. That same concept can be rebuilt for commoditization. And then when you talk about standardization of commodities, well, you're talking about issuing an asset. Well, we already have standards for that, and you just connect metadata to it. And there's some NFT related stuff, and then there's some fungible stuff. There's both fungible and non-fungible properties that commodities typically have. I may care, for example, where you grow your grapes. That's a big thing for wine. I may not care where you mine your gold, because gold is pretty standardized, but maybe I do. Maybe there's a sanctioned country, and gold from a particular market like Russia can't enter the global economy. So it's a choose your own adventure in terms of these things. And the challenge when you have fragmentation is that somebody gets really good at navigation, and that ends up being the middleman. And that person then gets to control the entire market dynamics, like Dan was alluding to when he talked about the butcher. There's this concept of supply and demand of meat, but it's not the supermarket that gets to decide that, and it's not you as the market participant. There's this middleman that just happens to be, because of the structure of the economy and in the right place, the right time. So he has a lot of power as a direct result of that, and then leverages that power to basically uh, amplify and enhance his political position. And that might be fine for meat in a small village. That's not okay when you're talking about 92% of the lithium output of a country. That's not okay when you talk about 45% of the coffee output of a country, because that means that one person or small group of people basically get to decide who gets to eat and who doesn't get to eat. They get to decide who gets to send their kids to college and who doesn't. They get to decide who starves to death and who doesn't starve to death. That's the lived experience for the bottom 3 billion people. So to liberate people, you just do it through building fair markets, and you get all these things together. And projects like Palmyra are examples of kind of a structured thought of how to combine these different things together. And what's cool is we all know our neighbors. So maybe you need connectivity. Well, then you bring World Mobile in, and then suddenly you have a connect the unconnected. And then maybe you need some credit lending. Well, we got RealFi. And that's what John O'Connor is doing, one of Dan's former colleagues when he worked with us. And John is figuring out how to get credit to those who don't have it. Maybe you need identity. Well, that's what we do with Hyperledger Identitas, for example. And maybe you need crowdfunding to basically develop a commodity. The problem with a lot of commodity development is the vast majority of it in the developing world is done by the haves, which means they get to mandate predatory terms over the have-nots when they extract it. Well, what if the have-nots can crowdfund the development of the commodity? It means it's not owned by a company, but by a cooperative at that point. So you get fair distribution of the yields that are there. Well, what do we do in the cryptocurrency space? I have ISPOs, initial token offerings. We have all kinds of newfangled ways that we've done to crowdfund things. And instead of crowdfunding tokens, you can crowdfund real world assets that are directly connected to things that have real utility and output in the global economy. The reason why they can't get liquidity, it's trust and it's markets. These are the things. And so it's pretty exciting when you really think about it and you get to that level.
Yeah, you touched on a few things there, and one was Theo, one of our coworkers, was recently in Greece, in Rhodes Island, and there's one person who buys all the olive oil in Rhodes, all of it. So there's one middleman that controls the whole entire market, right? So very, very, very interesting when you travel and have boots on the ground and you're learning these things inside these markets. Dan, he touched on something else I want you to speak about, and that's the crowdfunding, right? You just recently released the Endeavor platform. Can you talk a little bit about what Endeavor is and how that crowdfunding is going to kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, that's what Charles just described, and this is a way to give access, democratize these operations, and access that the average person did not have before. I mean, before you would have, if you wanted to be a part of a lithium operation, you have to be in the right place at the right time with the right amount of money, and it was only available to a select few. And so a platform like Endeavor, which is a crucial part of the Palmyra ecosystem, because it's all a cycle, right? So to produce a commodity, you have to create business, you have to open up a region for that commodity. That's where the Palm DAO comes in. And that's where you get these, that's the Catalyst style DAO, where you submit proposals to do business development, decentralized business development. That's what one of the big pillars of the Palmyra, of the Palm economy is. Another big pillar is a way for you to go from that part where you opened up the jurisdiction, but now you would like to actually build a commodity bearing operation. Now, how do you go about that in the legacy way? Well, in the legacy way, you have to go to some big bank, or you have to go to somebody who's got a bunch of money. In somewhere like United States or the UK or the EU, there are already established ways of doing that. If you're in a place like even Argentina, it's still gray. It's still the average person does not have that type of access. And so what happens is, again, the haves, as Charles said, the haves have pretty much all the opportunity, and everybody else just gets to, maybe if they're lucky enough, pick up some crumbs. And that's not sustainable, because that once again introduces that single attack vector. Because what if, okay, right now they are a kind ruler, but what if they become a tyrannical ruler? And just decide, okay, you guys go poor now. You guys go die now. That has happened before in history, and that will happen again in history, as long as there are these centralized points of access and these huge gates that are kept by these these centralized entities. Now, a platform like Endeavor fixes that. A platform like Endeavor gives the rest of us, the rest of the 99%, the opportunity to have access to these particular endeavors. That's why I called it endeavors, because they are endeavors. And to have the ability to collect that yield, to ability to have ownership of these assets in a fractional way. That's why blockchain is so perfect for this, because it gives you all the tooling to create that type of access in a manageable, responsible, viable way, which now creates a larger market of access for the average person. They have exposure to these assets. They have a way to build, to participate in these things, and they have a way to generate wealth for themselves like they haven't before. And as a commodity producer, you have a way to spin up an operation without having to sell your soul to some guy who buys all the olive oil in your province. And it's not just in Greece, I mean, Georgia is the same way. I mean, Georgia, we were talking about, this is way back before anybody even cared about NFTs and tokenization. We were out in Georgia back in, I think, 2018, 2019 ish. We were talking about potentially tokenizing wine and access to wine. And the reason being is because, again, Georgian wine had a really, the average winery owner had only got a fraction of the actual money or revenue generated from the wine sale, because there was only something like 2 processing plants that were available to process these wines. Because it doesn't matter how good of a wine you made, you could have your own winery, right? And you have limited amount of bottles, and then you create a business around it. Like some of them created chateau resorts where people go there and they'll have wine, and so you generate some income for that. But you don't have this major big league access. You don't have global access. Global access is restricted by these guys, because they're the ones that control access to those markets, and they're the ones you sell it to them for $1 a bottle. They'll charge $20 a bottle for it, and they'll get it because that's really what the market price is. But you can't get $20 a bottle because they cut off your access. Well, that's where Palmyra comes in, and that's more specifically that there's the same thing when you tokenize the actual operation that produces it, because now you don't have to be tied up by these guys, that the only guys that'll give you money for it, because nobody else has the ability to. Now you go out there, you present your case to the community like you do with things like Catalyst or things like the Cardano governance. You present your case to the community, and the community decides what happens. And that's what really what a free market is supposed to be like. And that's what we believe in, and that's why platforms like Endeavor are so important, because they give access to that free market. They give access to those people that deserve the opportunity to have that access and not be kept away from it by a middleman that serves no other function besides just being a middleman.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me a lot of like a Kickstarter, right? And one of the things you used to do back in the day, Charles, was, and I don't remember the name of the platform, but you used to go on the end of every one of your live streams and do a loan.
Yeah,
And
Kiva. That we literally built that company. Remember when I was doing those loans, I said, "Hey, we're going to do that." That's what RealFi is, and over time, it'll be able to get to retail, and it'll, for regulatory reasons, take a few years to eventually get there, unfortunately, but we will, and it'll be running completely on crypto rails. But it's the exact point. You want a situation where people who have capital have new ways to deploy that capital. And if they could deploy it in a way that's fair to the bottom 3 billion, not only can they get a better return, it actually massively improves the lives of the bottom 3 billion, because that fragmentation basically creates cartels that charge 85% or 150%. So you instead would pay 15 or 30%, much better for them, much better return for me, translates to billions of dollars of capital flooding into the developing world.
Absolutely. So we're kind of coming towards the end of our hour time, and I want to keep it on schedule. I need to ask you, Charles, though. Dan's a pretty funny guy, and you worked with him for a while. So we need to know what the funniest story is that you remember of working with Dan back in the day, because he's a comedian. He makes us laugh all the time. So I need to know kind of what the funniest story memory that you have of working with Dan is.
Oh man. There's been a lot of great adventures that we've gone on, but were you there when what was that kid's name? He was also named Jeremy, but he was the one who worked on the app, the ADA voucher vending machine. He helped launch the sale in Japan. You know which Jeremy I'm talking about?
Um, it's not the Jeremy that I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's not Jeremy Wood. It's
Yeah.
it's the other Jeremy. But there's this great story of him getting really, really drunk the day before on his
Oh
birthday.
yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, you tell the story, but yeah. No, that is a good story.
Okay, well, it's good that we're not using last names, because this is a great story.
Yeah.
So we had this kid who decided to join us as an intern, and he came from a university like in Indiana or Illinois. I can't remember. It's one of those I states. And he's just about finished his bachelor's degree and comes in, and he's all innocent and young. He'd never been outside of the United States before, had to get a passport to come and work with us. And the problem with Japan is when you're really young and you go to Japan for the first time, it's like Disneyland for adults. And so if you don't have like that moral fortitude, you go into these terrible character spirals that really get you. So you start accumulating lots of girlfriends and drinking very heavily and all these other things. So you went from like Mr. Rogers to Mr. Hyde in a pretty short period of time. So the day before the ADA sale went live in Japan, it was his birthday, so everybody in our office decided to take him out, and then he went drinking, and he drank way, way too much. So anyway, the next day when everything was supposed to go live, he was kind of the guy who knew how to run all the scripts to turn on everything on, and we were in the office, and it's like, "Why is this kid not showing up? Where the hell is he?" 10 AM, 11 AM. So eventually we told our HR guy who was Japanese, I said, "Hey, go find him." So he went over to his Airbnb and went into the Airbnb, couldn't find the kid anywhere. So he just started walking around, looking around. It's like, where, and suddenly they saw a large group of people aggregated in the park that was right next to the apartment. So he walks over to the park, and there's this guy just sleeping in the park naked. and, and he's always like, our HR guy was like, "Oh God, no, this is not what I think it's gonna be." So he goes up to him, and yeah, sure enough, it's him. He gets him up and hopes he's not dead. And then the Japanese police arrive right at that time. And our Japanese guy was like half Japanese. So what he did is he did the thing you do in Japan not to get arrested. You just pretend not to speak Japanese under any circumstances at all. And so the Japanese cop is just yelling at both these guys in Japanese, and he just keeps responding in English. He said, "Look, I'm Hawaiian. I don't know what's going on. This is my friend. He's very sick. I'm trying to get him back to the apartment." Eventually, the Japanese officer, "Get the hell out of here." So they goes back to the apartment, gets him and, cleaned up a little bit. And we're like, "Dude, we're sorry to have to do this to you, but you kind of have to come to work because you're the only guy who actually knows what scripts to run to start the sale." And and so anyway, he comes into the office and he's just like shaking uncontrollably, and we give him a coffee and everything like that. And eventually got it done and got it turned on. But I've never seen anybody in my life like so slowly type on the keyboard, and just like very deliberately. It's like that, like I'm so high right now, that whole thing. And he had the world's worst hangover.
Mm.
Um, anyway, yeah, it kind of caused some problems for me. He dropped out of college and all these things. So I think we may
Yeah,
have
yeah. I've seen.
radically
Yeah,
altered his life.
we've seen these spirals, especially back in the day. I mean, yeah. Like a few people happened to a few people there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. If you remember one of our lead devs, I'm not gonna say which one. when he came to Japan. He got, our friends took him out, and in the middle of the night, he goes on our Slack before the one that we had, the main one, like we had one way before. He says, goes on there, says, "Oh my God, I am so drunk and high right now. This is amazing." And then at that point, Nikos says, "What the hell are you doing? Get off company Slack with that shit."
Nikos, yeah, he was the Greek authoritarian. We love Nikos. He was our first operating officer. It was like Stelios Kantos from American Dad. We were like, Nikos, but he brought all the Greeks in. So we have him to thank for Agalos and everybody else, and that worked out well for us. But Dan was right there in the beginning, and he watched all this crap, and he had to deal with getting that whole process underway. That's why we hired him, to kind of bring some discipline and get that damn thing under schedule. And it was hard times, and we were flying by the seats of our pants, and nothing worked ever, and everything was always breaking, and we just had to like fix stuff at 2:00 in the morning. And he had gallows humor. It's just like, I wonder if the elevator is going to rip today and kill us all. We just talk about it, and it was 2015, 2016 were dark times.
I remember when my mom came to visit, and all she brought you guys was, as a present, was like a huge bottle of vodka.
Yeah,
it was like a gallon of Scully.
Yeah, and every time you go to the office, because I'd fly back and forth, and I'd come in Japan, I'd check the giant bottle of vodka in the office, and I'd see how down it was. It kind of gave me like a barometer on how stressful things have been since I got back. And when that thing started getting close to empty, I was like, "Fuck, we got to take a break, man."
Oh yeah.
So we kind of reached our time limit, Charles. Is there any last words you want to say before we wrap it up with Dan?
Well, yeah, we had $200,000 for the first year Cardano, the whole thing, everything, $200,000, and now it's a $40 billion ecosystem, give or take the markets. So, great things, they can have little and humble beginnings, and they just require a good team and good ideas. And you have to have history on your side, and you have to have integrity and character. And you got to wake up every day and just want to solve that problem. And you have to attract great people, and you just keep motivated, and you just keep chipping away at it. And it's not like you can do it overnight. And people need to have patience. And the thing is, when you're solving really hard things, like real world things, you're going to have a lot of setbacks, because the problem is that governments change. Not too long ago, we had Sleepy Joe as our president. Now we got Trump. The world's a little different. And, if you'd asked me 2 years ago if I thought Trump was going to be president again, I think most people would have probably said no. But now he's here, and it's a radically different relationship. And we went from Argentina is a crazy libertarian government, and maybe the U.S. will have to sanction it, and something, to Malay being the best friends of Doge and Elon Musk and Trump, and texting them at 1:00 in the morning. And now Argentina is a strategic partner. So things change quickly, and real world asset companies, they have to be really agile and really with it. But at the end of the day, what are we doing here? The whole point of these types of capabilities is to bank the unbanked, and to provide a financial system for those who don't have one. And if the mission is pulled off 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, when you widen the aperture and you look outward, you've transformed people's lives in very positive ways. And so patience is definitely a key one. And also grab a shovel. These are all open source projects. I love everybody building in our ecosystem and adjacent ecosystems. They live and die by the level of community participation. And so if you see something that's broken, instead of saying, "Oh, well, the latest iPhone sucks, and I'm going to go to Samsung or something," what you do is you're actually accountable for that. Go fix it. So if there's something that's missing or broken and you can add something, talk to the principals and say, "Hey, I have this brilliant idea." And vast majority of people that made Cardano what it is today, that's where that came from. Somebody showed up and figured something out. Didn't like the DevX, Aiken came. Didn't like this thing came. Didn't like this thing came. It's the same here. So it's a long journey. It's going to take a long time, longer than people expect. But you can go from naked hungover in a park to multi-billion-dollar ecosystem. It's pretty remarkable when you really think about it.
Oh, yeah.
It is. Dan, and can you just finish up last words, and maybe let the people know how they can participate in the public sale that we have going on?
Sure, yeah. It's really great to be able to be to be able to have been a part of building this ecosystem with Charles, and now be able to actually build a business within this ecosystem. And this is a feeling that it's very difficult to describe, because I remember when we were when we were still dealing with the $200,000 in the bank, trying to figure out how we're going to build this thing. We're going to build the pre-sale app. We're going to do this and this other thing, and cover all these jurisdictions and get all this stuff. And then we were all working out of that office in Homachi, Osaka, the same office where Zen Gate started. And around the same table, and this went from that to this amazing multi-billion-dollar ecosystem, and being a part of that journey, and now being able to go on my own journey and have my own crew with me, like you, Brian, like Sam, like Theo, like Nico, like everybody's is working with us right now, and we have over 20 people on the team right now. It's an amazing feeling. It feels like evolution. It feels like we're expanding, and it feels like we're doing something that matters. And Palmyra matters, just like Cardano matters. Palmyra matters because it brings a solution to a problem, and not the other way around, because RWAs are real. It's boots on the ground. It's helping real problems getting solved, and that's what it's all about. And that's what our first principles are about, and that's what we're about at Zen Gate, and that's what we're building. And right now we're at the tail end of our public sale. It's been amazing. We had an amazing amount of support from the community. You can still join it, where we're doing it through T-1, a Cardano IPO platform. And if you would like to be part of the Palm economy, please go over there and KYC. Again, something that we have to do to be able to work in these markets, but it's for the good of the ecosystem. It is because we are future-proofing ourselves to be able to expand to that global scale that this ecosystem deserves, and that Cardano deserves to be utilized on. And so again, I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank you, Charles, for jumping on with me this morning, or your afternoon, and chatting it up. Thank you, Brian, for hosting us. And everybody, please check out Palm Economy. Check out the public sale that's happening right now through T-1. Check out Palmyra, that app. Endeavor is also live. You can get all the information on zengate.global. Down there where Brian is pointing, but now it's Palmyra Endeavor. But anyway, all the information is available. Follow us on our socials. Ping me. I'm available. I'm available for comments. So as you all know, you can always ping me, and I'll do my best to talk to you as soon as I can. So thanks a lot, and great, great being able to talk about this today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.
Cheers.